Okay, Shanti?
ಈ ಲೈಟ್ ಇದಕ್ಕುಂಟವ ಇವತ್ತು ಒಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾಡಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ
Yogesh, you can mute everybody simultaneously. Shanti will start.
Start.
Okay.
Gajendran sir, just unmute yourself. Shanti ma'am also.
I've done it.
Shanti ma'am. No, your Shanti ma'am is muted.
Kiran sir.
Yeah.
Just last time there was some this thing error happened in the recording this thing aspect. So this time, please take care of it also.
I'm muted. Yeah, Yogesh.
Yes, sir.
That there is one option that you give unmute to all the participants. That you will have to remove.
Maybe it's not working here, sir.
Anyway, that's okay. We will ask all the participants to unmute. So
I have option called mute all.
Then okay, right, okay. We'll request. We'll start then.
Yeah, right, sir.
Respected principals from various colleges, because we started as a single college from MPM College Karkala, but now we have actually joined with other colleges in Mangalore region and also from Belgaum and other parts of Karnataka. So principal of MPM College Karkala, principal of Government First Grade College Kapu, principal of Government First Grade College Tenkanyadur, Hiriyadka, principal and staff members of RPD College of Arts and Commerce. I am really thrilled and very happy to welcome you all to this fourth lecture on vulnerability to pandemic changes, issues, challenges, and its implication. So our purpose was not just to understand pandemic from a health point of view, or actually it's a virus point of view, because it has got its implications and ramification in all sections and all parts of our life as well as society. So we have included lectures from diverse field. We already had 3 important lectures from actually one was actually we began with what the problem was with the health sector. Then the second was the most important one, was actually to understand the virus and what are its characters. And the third one actually on the economic front, actually we had what are the impact on the unorganized sector. Today I am very happy to tell you that my senior and a very good friend of mine, Gaji, who are also been part of our similar what you call emancipatory ideas from where we work, we actually constantly try to do. So he'll be speaking on pandemics, exclusionary policies and practices, and transnational intersectionalities, notes on COVID-19. It's because it's not just within national sphere, it's an international sphere. We'll have to look at things. Basically, we also see the nationalism of vaccinations. And also the way vaccinations within the structure has been based on our social structure, it has been getting certain sections are getting more important and certain sections totally neglected. So to have a very rigorous social science analysis of pandemic, I requested Gajendran, and he wholeheartedly actually accepted my invitation on the behalf of our principal and staff members of my college and all other colleges. I once again very wholeheartedly welcome you, Gaji.
Thank you.
My dear friend. So to continue means to moderate this session and how it has to go, and to introduce our today's honorable speaker, I hand over the rest of the sessions to be moderated by my friend Shanti from New Delhi. It's over to you, Shanti. No, you're not audible.
Yeah, unmute. Madam, you have to unmute. I unmuted.
No, you're again muted. Shanti, you're muted.
Muted and increase the volume. Unmuted.
Unmute.
Unmute and increase the volume.
Shanti ma'am, just unmute yourself. No, still your mic is off.
Yes, and then increase the volume. Increase the volume.
No, we can't hear.
Increase the volume, please.
Kiran sir, please call her to the phone.
Audible now?
Yes, now.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. It is pleasure and thanks for Kiran, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here, part of this session as a moderator and also as a, audience. I welcome the speaker, my dearest friend, Professor Gajendran. He is right now faculty teaching and researching in modern Indian studies, Gottingen University, Germany. Basically, his area of interest being on not on caste, but casteless communities, finding the history and origin of the casteless community, casteless Tamils basically. He did his PhD doctorate from Columbia University. I hope next to our Baba Shageb, doctorate from Tamil community. So it is a very proud moment for me to share this news. And his area of interest are culture, memory, and finding the origin and history of the casteless communities, basically Tamils. And I'm sure that his commitment and insightful teaching experience will give a very wonderful session today. I welcome and hand over the session to Dr. Gajendran.
Thank you. I hear voices coming, so maybe we have to unmute.
Just 1 second. I request all the participants to unmute. Sorry, mute.
Thank you. It is truly a pleasure to be with you all, and very quickly, Kiran, we got contacted through a talk that I was delivering, and I really thank Kiran for inviting me to be with you all. And I've always seen him during our, contemporary JNU days. Kiran was always serious about many social issues that confront us on a daily basis. He was known for his rigorous research and sincere contribution. And over the years, and I've seen that how Kiran is emerging as a very important person intellectually across the country. So I thank you, Kiran, for inviting me, tracking down, and then enabling me to speak on this theme. I appreciate very much. Also, I would like to thank the principal of MPM College.
Gajendran sir.
Yeah.
Gajendran sir, please speak loudly or
Okay, I'll speak
Keep your
loudly.
mic near.
I'll
Yeah,
speak
yeah.
loudly.
Now it's more legible. Yeah, audible.
Yeah. So I thank the principal of MPM College for taking the time to be here with us. And also other, like Kiran said, other principals and other colleges in and around Udupi. So thank you so much for joining us and for letting your students also to join. And I appreciate that. And of course, I thank dearest friend Santi, Dr. Santi, who has worked on health issues and women's, relations and on health issues and so on through rigorous field work. So she is actually more informed on these issues. So I really appreciate you, Santi, for taking the time to be with us and helping us as a moderator. And of course, I want to thank the keynote speaker also, Professor Nakiran. I attended, by the way, that talk. I logged in, I sat through the whole keynote speech, and it was very powerful. And as somebody, who's specialist in health, community health and social medicine, Professor Nakiran was fantastic, laid out the data across the country very precisely. And probably my talk is...
Just...
yes.
Yeah, you can... louder, or you have to be closer to your mic.
Okay, I'll try to be out. I'll try to be louder. Yeah.
Now it's more audible.
Good,
yeah, thank you.
Good. So when he finished the keynote address, Professor Nakiran touched upon a very important point: universal health care. So I want to expand this concept of universal aspect, literally in the sense not just within India but also across the world, and then see whether I can make sense to you all. So I also thank the audience, all of you, close to 251 I see. Thank you for taking the time. I'm just like you, one of you from some interior part of India, struggling to understand things now across the world. I do field work, in India and in different parts of India, including in Karnataka. My recent paper is on Hubli. So you see, I do work on Karnataka also. And of course, most recently, just before the pandemic, I finished my field work in the Caribbean. I was roaming around in the country, Suriname and Guyana and so on, trying to understand the Indians who were taken there in the 19th century as indentured laborers to work in the sugarcane plantations. So I wanted to be with them, understand them ethnographically, anthropologically, culturally, and so on. So I've written an article also about this in the journal Essays in Philosophy. It's out. So that way, and of course, I lived in the US for more than 12 years or so. So next project is going to touch upon Europe, US, Caribbean, and India, So that way, I'm a local person like you at the same time, trying to understand the global scenarios. Hopefully I end up my life back in India in some corner. So thank you all for joining. I want to appreciate that. And so great. So now I would like to share my PowerPoint to proceed on my talk. So hopefully it goes well. Yeah, here you go. And the slideshow. Yes, from the beginning. Yeah. Okay, good. Now, in case if there is, I want to have some caveats before I talk on this theme. First of all, I'm like Kiran said, I'm not a health science person or a community health person and so on. I'm an anthropologist and a historian. These are the subjects that I've been trained in. But I've been very close, careful, and informed observer and generalizer, so to say, and person, in that sense, I've been very closely observing the COVID-19 situation as it hit the world and across the world. Sitting in Germany, it was very scary moments. And we had to experience scary moments. And then, so that way, but, I've been very careful observer based on that. And of course, I've been also reading many social science papers, research papers on COVID. So based on these references, I will mention the references also during my talk. I'm going to speak on this theme. Okay, so in case if something goes wrong with my gadget, I will have a backup. I have a backup. I'll run and get another laptop and log it in. So if there is a problem, please don't go away. I'll make sure within 5 or 10 minutes, I'll re-log in with another laptop. So, having put all this in place, now I'd like to go into my talk and with my PowerPoint. Okay, the theme for today that I'm going to speak on is called Pandemics, Exclusionary Policies and Practices, and Transnational Intersectionalities, Notes on COVID-19. Now, the plan is this. This is how my talk is going to be. Please caution me, maybe after 40 minutes or so, and I don't want to go beyond that. I'll try to wind up if I'm not able to cover my talk within 40 minutes maximum. The plan of my, for my talk is this. First, I want to really unpack the theme. I could put very complex. What am I saying? It may not be clear. So I want to sort of unpack the very title, the theme of my talk. And then I want to talk a little bit about pandemics and conceptual challenges. How do we understand a pandemic? The very word pandemic. And then what are the other related terms that are around pandemic? Do they help us to understand, or do they remain a challenge for us? So I want to say a little bit about that. And then I want to move into the theme section, pandemic healthcare response disparities. We all know, how the response should be, but there are clear disparities, as the other speakers have been saying before, right from the keynote speaker, Professor Nakiran. So how do we understand the disparities at the global level and the local level? I want to say a little bit about it. And then, of course, this pandemic-based digital hierarchies and digital disparities, digital inequalities that has come about. So the technological domination, we don't have a clue. Look at the way we started. We are struggling to figure out whether we have muted or unmuted. What do we do? All that, somebody hacking in, spoiling the talk irresponsibly. All these things are going on, right? So we are trying to figure out, so this technology is dominating through this pandemic, so we need to be aware of that. And I want to conclude my talk by talking about, pandemics and what do I mean by transnational intersectionalities. There I want to touch race, caste, gender, and class aspects, the problems. And what are the ways, what are the possibilities for democratization of, say, healthcare and recovery, all that. So that's a kind of the plan of my talk. So let's see, I'll just, clarifications of the theme that I'm speaking on. Pandemic, the very word pandemic, we were not used to this very word pandemic before COVID-19 hit us, right? Till then we knew about disease, right? We all have a local Indian language-based term. For example, in Tamil, noi, it means disease. Noigal, plural, diseases. Beyond that, we didn't know anything. Now we have to figure out a way. What is a disease and what is an epidemic? What is a pandemic? All that. So we are getting used to that, and we are struggling to figure out still. It's not fully clear yet, but so pandemic is basically a disease that has spread over a large area. So over a country, many parts of the world. So it's not anymore local, right? So we have this is not the first pandemic we have had. That is, COVID-19 is not the first pandemic. We've had pandemics before all along in human history, right? We have heard about the medieval age plagues, and villages were dropping down dead, and then smallpox, and then flu. Still a major havoc across the world. Many Americans died today, and in other parts of the world. And every year, Americans, get a flu shot. You have to get a flu shot literally every year or something to keep up your immunity. So we have had such pandemics before, but COVID-19 has played a havoc like like no other pandemic before. Whoever thought about isolation, this kind of a death, toll, unimaginable, right? You have to be isolated, you have to be quarantined, you are not supposed to get out, and you are not supposed to shake hands with people. I mean, imagine the psychological trauma. You cannot hug people. Hugging your own child, your own partner, you need to be very responsible, right? So these things we were never used to. I think handshake has come to an end, unfortunately, because of COVID. We all fist bump at the most, fist bumping, right? So that's about pandemic. It's cuts across the borders and so on. Okay, that's what I mean. Also, I'm sticking to that in a popular meaning. Exclusionary policies and practices. What do I mean by exclusionary practices and so on? So exclusion is something that you exclude, you push out, you keep out. So that means what? In what sense I'm using the word exclusionary policies and practices? If I practice something exclusionary, that means I don't allow other men, women, and children. I exclude them, I push them out. So it's a negative usage. That's what I mean by exclusion. Negative usage. So othering. The word is othering. You other, this is I and the other, right? Me, mine, and the other, that kind of stuff, right? I'm othering other women, men, and children. So, and when I other, what do? I don't treat them equally. I put them as high and low. Who's high, who's low? So I grade my fellow humans, fellow women, fellow men, fellow children. So that means I see my children as superior and the other children as inferior. That's othering, right? So self-privileging, I privilege, self-privileging, and underprivileging others. That's what I mean by exclusionary practice, right? I privilege myself and others are underprivileged. And then self-dehumanizing. Everybody keeps using the word dehumanizing. I agree. But I'm beginning to use more of self-dehumanizing. When I treat somebody racially different and inferiorized, based on caste or based on sex, I am a male, a women are inferior to me. If I think like that, even thinking, that means I'm sort of self-privileging, I'm self-dehumanizing. The moment I think a woman is not equal to me, I lose my humanity, right? So you can say you are dehumanizing the woman, that's one way. But most importantly, I lose my humanity. So I self-dehumanize. So I would urge you all to talk not only about dehumanization, but also about how each one of us could slip into self-dehumanizing possibilities. So we need to be very careful the way we speak to other men, women, and children. Are we self-dehumanizing by grading them low, particularly, right? So that's what I mean. And also self-ghettoization. Ghetto, we know, it comes from the medieval age. People were pushed into a particular zone and they were not allowed to come out. Jews, for instance, suffered this. So the ghetto is very much connected with the Jewish community. Of course, I'm speaking to you from Germany. Hitler, we know that, butchered millions of Jews. And other communities called Romas, about whom I will talk about, Romas. So in that sense, the Romas and the Jews, they were ghettoized. That means they were not allowed to come out of the particular residential area. So that's ghettoizing. But when Hitler did it, he sort of self-ghettoized himself. He sort of, self-dehumanized himself. So ghettoization. Also, I want us to think about self-ghettoization. And then, of course, these are all birth-based, right? Birth, there are different kinds of inequalities and discrimination and exclusion, but there are birth-based. Race, caste, gender, all of them are birth-based, right? And also endogamy. Endogamy means marriage within a particular community, right? Endogamy is very crucial to keep up exclusion, right? So racial murders are happening right now. If two different racialized communities get married, they have children, they are prone to persecution in the US, in Europe, and in many rich countries as well as in poor countries. So that is based on, that kind of discrimination is based on endogamy. So we have caste, right? Caste would die away if there is no endogamy, but caste depends on endogamy to divide all of us. There's 270 people, you scratch a bit, we all talk about our caste, right? How do we say this? What is it? Our organs are the same. So our qualifications are the same, we speak the same language, yet some of us might think caste-wise superior and others are inferior. How does it happen? What are the religious, cultural, textual, conceptual ways by which we have self-ghettoized, self-dehumanized in the caste? So all these are man-made, right? They are man-made means invented. They are not discovered. It's not like a fruit. It's not like a tree. It's not like a mountain, right? They are all invented by mostly men. Racial differences have been invented by men. So literally women did not play a role or played a very crucial role mimicking the men, right? So race, caste, gender discrimination, no woman would say, I am lower to you, man. No way, right? She is a human. But she has been physically harmed to accept her inferiority. Who did it? The man did it. So it's man-made. Most of the exclusions are man-made, not women-made. We have to be very careful. Of course, I do understand women mimic such men too. We need to be careful about that. Okay. All right. So these are man-made inventions, and the moment I invent an exclusion, say racial exclusion, I make it a norm. So I bring in endogamy, I produce, this is how we do it. That's our way of life. We don't let blacks and whites come together. They cannot have relationship. They cannot have sex. They cannot have babies, right? So they cannot fall in love. Who says this? I, as a privileged racial person, could say that and make it a norm. Endogamy. You are not supposed to touch. You are not supposed to eat together. You are not supposed to have relationship, sex, babies, and all that, right? Okay? So it becomes a norm. And then it becomes naturalized. The moment they create it as a norm, over a period of time, it gets naturalized, like a tree, like a rock. Oh, we've been doing it for centuries. You better follow. If you don't do it, we are going to cut your arms. We are going to cut your legs, right? That's how it is said. So what is the exclusionary practices become normativized, and then they get naturalized. That's what I'm trying to say. So the instance could be apartheid. We know today South Africans are suffering still. Apartheid is over. We know about Mandela, right? But still, native Africans, South Africans are ghettoized. They are pushed into ghettos. They cannot come out. There are walls around their localities in today's South Africa. Whites don't allow them to come into the, Africans cannot come into the white localities very casually. No way. So that's that. Then Hitler is a fine example of this kind of exclusion, normativization, and naturalization. Nazism, he believed in Aryanism, and probably he was deeply influenced by the Aryan ideas of India. We have not figured that out. In the very Hitler's emergence and Nazism, do ideas from India, Aryan, ideas connected with Aryanism from India, do they have a role in the way Nazism evolved? Social sciences and humanities are yet to work on this theme. Somebody has to do it. So that's one set. And then I want to talk about this transnational aspect. What do we mean transnational is? It's not simply between countries, international. No, it's something across the countries, transnational. We know transnational corporations, right? There is no limit. It keeps growing across many nations. That's what I mean by transnational. What do I mean by intersectionality? Intersectionality, means how certain socio-cultural problems do not exist autonomously. They don't exist independently. They touch many other things. For example, they intersect in the word, they cut across. Okay, that's what I mean by intersectionality. Okay, intersectionality. Example, gender. So a woman is deprived today in many ways in India and elsewhere, here in Germany. By the way, in many jobs in Germany, women are not equally paid as the German men. That's so shocking, right? This is one of the top countries in the world where human life is respected a lot. I live here, therefore I say this, okay, on a daily basis. It's not that there is milk and honey flowing every day on the streets of Germany. No way. There are racial problems still. There are inequalities still. People are discriminated. But in addition to that, they're struggling to figure out how to humanize things. Even so, we find German women are paid less in Germany, you see? So that means what? There is this class connection to why women are put below, they are poor and all that. So there is this racial aspect, caste aspect. They all connect with why a woman is humiliated, physically violated in India. She's looked as from some minority religion we say, or some caste, lower caste group we say. That's how she is physically. I think every 3 minutes an Indian woman is attacked in the name of caste, you see. So that way things intersect. It's not merely her sex as a woman, but she belonged to a particular religion, particular caste, particular class, all of them intersect. So to understand the social problem, I think the concept of intersectionality is extremely important to understand the complexity of an issue like caste or race or gender. So in that sense, I think the future projects, many of that we do, should be directed by the concept of intersectionality, I would argue. So I combine transnational and intersectionalities to talk about transnational intersectionality. So caste, by the way, is in India. It originated in India, it flourished in India, all that. Now it is across the world. Casteism, caste-based physical violence is happening in America, by the way. And it is happening in Europe. It is happening in the Caribbean. Casteism, caste-based physical violence. Imagine in the Caribbean, nobody has written about it. Because I did field work, and people have, in my interview, they have told me how they are located because they eat beef, because they eat pork. We are okay with white Americans eating beef and pork. But when an Indian eats, it becomes low, right? So this Caribbeans have told me about this. Indians who have lived there for 5-6 generations, who never came back to India, are identified as low and humiliated. You see the transnational intersectionality of caste in the Caribbean, caste in the US. So that way, I am beginning to think about, nobody has used this phrase, I'm beginning to conceptualize transnational intersectionalities to understand race. Do we have problems of race in India? Speak to the Northeast friends, you will know. I've traveled in Mizoram, Meghalaya, and Nagaland, and so on. You got to go and see and what is happening, right? The problem of race in India, we are yet to speak about. So that way, you have the transnational intersectionality that I want all of us to be sensitive to understand any issue, any social issue. It's not anymore just local or anymore global. It's local and global, interconnected. So that's about the sort of clarification of my theme. I owe this concept of intersectionality to this great sister, if I may call so, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. Some of you may know, those who study law. She is a professor at my own good old university, Columbia University. She is at Columbia Law School. She was the one who invented this concept in the 80s. Kimberly Crenshaw, amazing professor. She talks about, look at this, her area of study, family, gender, sexuality, social justice, and human rights. Powerful, right? And she created this term. No, we cannot understand a woman's situation. She is, look at the picture. She is an African American. She is a woman. So race and gender is already combined in her very living. And she can't say, I'm ill-treated only because of my race. She's also probably, if at all she went through the pains, she's also ill-treated because of her gender. And then the class, all of them. So therefore, it's not a surprise for me. This sister came up with this idea of intersectionality. I owe her my understanding, and I'm using her concept. She has not used the word in the plural sense, but I'm beginning to see multiple intersectionalities. Therefore, I'm pluralizing it, and because it is going across, there are interconnecting things across many countries. I am beginning to fix this adjective, transnational intersectionalities, inspired by Sister and Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, pandemic, conceptual and behavioral changes. We have lots of challenges, how do we understand the pandemic? So I'm sort of, I think, speaking to all of you in that way. Suddenly we were bombarded with the term social distancing. I'm sitting here in Germany. Last year, I come back from office. Suddenly schools close, everything stops, and we are informed. I get an email, you cannot enter your office till you are informed. And how to go? We are in a shop. So I got scared sitting at home. No crisis, no sirens, nothing. But social distancing, you cannot meet your friends. No more meeting friends, hosting them for dinner, all that. We were bombarded. I didn't know how to react, right? Social distancing. Also, as an Indian, I thought, whoa, damn, I mean, how are we going to there are already social distancing practices, exclusionary practices in the name of religion, in the name of caste, in the name of class, in the name of gender in India, right? A menstruating woman cannot go to a temple. Gods don't say, men say, right? Manu has written about it. We all know that, right? So this kind of thing, right? So we have already social distancing. And on top of that, this pandemic, I thought very instantly the social distancing, concept of social distancing would be misused in India. I don't want to go into India, but let me talk about US, what happened. Based on, I give the reference here, the source, based on this. Clearly, the source says, residential racial segregation in the US. So I'm talking about US more than India, right? It's better I stay away from home a little bit and talk about the US. So conservatism. Whenever in the US, if you hear about the word conservatism, and somebody introduces himself or herself to you as a conservationist, it means that clearly the person is, Orthodox Christian and race believer, all of that. Okay. For me, conservatism is clearly connected with white supremacy, right? White is the superior person, everybody else is inferior. So therefore, there are zones in the US, we all know, everybody is crazy about America and all that, but there are many, almost literally every state. There is no one state in the US which doesn't have racially segregated zone. Can you believe it? So racial segregation, racialized ghettoization is there in the US for long, right now. And now comes COVID. Imagine what would happen to those African Americans who are already in the ghettos. So racial segregation. So therefore I say it is re-ghettoizing the oppressed. They have already been oppressed. As African Americans, we know that Floyd, George Floyd, brother George Floyd, how he was killed, right? And so this is already happening. I mean, where else you would find a police officer killing George Floyd like that? So this is already pre-pandemic scenario, right? And now the pandemic comes, and so re-ghettoization and then physical distancing of the oppressed is going to happen. Another concept that we should know about gentrification. I lived in Harlem in New York, right, for many years. I chose to live with African Americans, to be part of them, to learn from them, to exchange ideas with them. I still cherish that. So, and now when I go where I lived in Harlem in New York, many of my friends, African Americans who were in the street, they are not there anymore. That means they have been gentrified. That means they've been pushed out. So the richer white folks have bought their houses and so on. And therefore, the gentrification is happening. The poor who are there, the poor locality is further impoverished and pushed out of Harlem. Okay, so this is what is called structural racism. The structural racism is still there. On top of that, we have now social distancing, and so furthering the spatial segregation, and there were inequities in health, and already they were suffering health issues. And now this is COVID further. And by the way, therefore, the blacks die 2.5 times more than the whites in the US today. Okay, we don't know the havoc of Delta. Already they are talking about another one now. Another variant is already coming up. Is today's news. A new variant in the US that has popped up, which we don't know where it's going to lead to. So there are many variants likely to come, and we may not have exact clear vaccination for them. So we need to have booster shots to build on the vaccination we have already had. Hope all of you have had. If you have not, please go get it done today. The saving your life is much higher with the vaccination and than when you have not done vaccination. So please get it done. No more hesitancy, no more postponement. Now in Germany, what happened was suddenly a community called Romas, who of course, Hitler was going after and killed along with the Jews, they were also gassed to death. Romas have a very interesting history. One of the origin stories tells that these were the Indians who migrated to Europe some 1,000 years ago, and so on. Some of them have some religious symbolisms, not all of them, some of them, in countries like Hungary and so on. So here in Germany today, suddenly the infection rate went up with the Romas in my own city, Gottingen, and they were re-stigmatized and re-marginalized, and their localities were sort of ghettoized. quarantined forcibly and humiliated. So this is a community that has been humiliated already, peripheralized, marginalized. Now with this, they were further stigmatized here in Germany. And of course, a lot of my German friends were against that. They wrote against it. Things are much better now. And so in Germany, again, EU is a beautiful concept now. You can crisscross any country. Around the 17 countries in Germany, I can crisscross anywhere because I live in Germany, right? Go to France or Switzerland and Prague, which we all did, right? Very casually. Now with this COVID, border control, we were in a shock. Austrians who were in Germany, they were in a shock. Oh, we can't get back to our own country. This is happening within the rich few European countries, imagine. And then in a country like Bulgaria, Romas, again, there are in Bulgaria, Romas, they were identified, they were already in the ghettos. And imagine the government sending disinfectants and they were disinfected. So whoever you saw as a Roma, you spray disinfectant on them. Horrible, right? And it was a horrible news across the world. And they were, in fact, they were sprayed. So this was in Bulgaria. And then the Slovak soldiers in Slovakia, there are 8% of Romas are there in Slovakia, right? Czechoslovakia, Czech is divided now, and Slovakia, as we know. So Slovak soldiers went and enforced lockdowns. They were already ghettoized. And you bring in lockdown. That means nobody should step out. Nobody could go get anything. They are already in a cramped place. They cannot even go get food. And they were not given food, right? So soldiers, and how do if I'm hungry, my kids are hungry, my family is hungry, I got to step out. So you don't have a remedy. When I step out, not to steal others' food, but just to go buy my own food, and you send soldiers to attack. That's happened in Slovakia. Roma suffered. And India, we don't have to ask. City versus slum, every city has a slum. Every village we have, right? In Tamil Nadu, we have Oor and Cheri, right? We already have this. Our villages, our towns, our cities have not been democratic. You go to Chennai, you want to rent a place, they will ask you your caste, they will ask your religion. If you are a Muslim or if you are a meat eater, you are done. This is in a Dravidian land, Chennai. I don't have to ask about Delhi, right? A friend of mine, a professor from Germany, he wanted to do field work in Delhi. He couldn't get a rent because he was a Muslim, right? I don't want to name him. So that way is very clear. So the stereotypes in India, we already have oppressor and the oppressed, pure vegetarians, right? Some of us are pure vegetarians. I don't know what is it. COVID vaccination, we don't know, comes from lizard's blood or rhino sperm. We don't know. We need a COVID shot to live, but we are pure vegetarians, right? It's very interesting. So somebody has to write a dissertation on our concept of pure vegetarian food. Are we authentically so or not? All that. So we clean versus unclean communities. We have touchable versus untouchables. I think India is a place where untouchability was invented. And that's, I think, the future social sciences and humanities will grapple with it. Who invented the concept of untouchability and what were our philosophers doing about it and so on. So all that, given these conceptual behavioral challenges that we all have across the world, I talked about US, I talked about India, and I'm leaving out many other parts of the world where things are worse. And now, therefore, I'm saying the last point, should we talk about a more humane approach? What could be our physical distancing? Should we call it as social, physical? I physically distance myself from my partner, from my children or whatever, right? From my friends. So that I take care of myself as well as others. Physical is in quarantining. Could there be some ethical humanism involved in this? Do we have ethical humanism in India? We may all jump to say yes. But given this, intersectionalities, given the transactionalities, how do we grapple with it? We need to be alert. So pandemic response disparities. So very quickly, so we have this, WHO was saying, high-income countries have 87% of vaccine supply. Can you believe it? 87% of the vaccine supply is taken away by the rich countries, and poor countries get only 0.2%. So that way, we have this crisis. Kiran, do you have, are you talking about any time or something, or you're okay? Okay, it's okay. I'll continue. So So that way, so this vaccine distribution is not on a level playing field. So the poor countries are having a raw deal. We also know high-end hospitals and versus no bed patients, right? In the US was the case. African Americans could not get beds, could not enter many hospitals. They were racially discriminated and they suffered. So therefore, the graded life value is very much there, right? In many rich countries, people suffer due to their ethnic identity or racial discrimination and so on. India too, we saw that discrimination, right? And therefore, as Kiran was saying, vaccine nationalism, passports. Now you have to have it in you have to have a paper record of having been vaccinated to travel. Many students who are going to come from India over to Germany, we are all telling them, have you done the vaccination? Otherwise, don't think about coming to Germany, right? So you need to have that. Already people are not allowed to enter. And on top of that, you have this vaccine nationalism, right? App-based. You need to have a powerful cell phone and then all that, mobile certificates and so on. I'll show you a little bit in a few minutes. So all gadget-based information. How many can afford this? Many people cannot afford a good cell phone. And we are talking about app-based, vaccine certificates. How do we do it? And then, so vaccine-induced invincibility. Israel, got its population 100% vaccinated and happily went to war on Palestine, right? Hundreds and thousands of people have been reduced homeless in Palestine today, right? So the vaccine, 100% vaccination also played a role in pushing Israel for a war, I guess. And now we need to think about that. So right now, the West versus the rest is very clear, right? West will continue to hold this kind of percentage of vaccination and continue to sort of downgrade the non-Western countries, I guess. One has to be very careful. And non-Westerners in the West have to be very alert about their own vaccination, stick to the rules, stick to the certificates more than the natives, right? So all these are going on. There are travel restrictions. So that way, I think COVID also added to a lot of disparities, even in the response mechanisms, healthcare mechanisms, all of them, okay? So it's not democratizing yet. So this is the kind of thing you need to have in your cell phone, like a digital vaccine passport. Look at the way you got to show. When you cross the customs, in many countries, you need to show. So you need to be alert. So those of you who are traveling, please be alert to this. And of course, digital disparities, we all know that. I'm going to quickly go over it, broadband elites, as we call. If we don't have a broadband, you cannot have quick communication. There is going to be digital problems. I cannot present the presentation that I'm doing, right? I made sure I have this broadband, all connected, well organized. I have a backup laptop, all that. I am privileged, you see. How many you can expect to do this backup mechanism, right? So there is this technological domination, and in yesterday's news is that the National Health Service of UK, they have come up with a mobile app which would say the moment you get a message in your phone that from the National Health Service, you need to self-quarantine. Imagine. So and you can't escape that. If you don't self-quarantine, they may go after you. Police may go after you. We don't know. So all cell phone based. But how many can afford, right? So when you think you have, therefore I call re-digitalization of the techies, the technically qualified IITians and IIMians moving across the world. They can do this. They can re-digitalize themselves. But how about the people who are already marginalized in India, in the US, in Europe? They are further de-digitalized, as I call, right? So there are these confusions, and then jobs are based on Zoom meetings. How do you dress up? How do you speak? What is your body language? You shouldn't have interruption technologically. All those decide whether you get a job or not, because we are on lockdown. We are in quarantine also. And there are students in the US who go to coffee houses to get a better connectivity. You buy a coffee, you can sit in Starbucks. This is happening in Delhi too. But how many rural Indians, 70%, 5%, our agrarian sector in India is 75%. So how many of our rural Indians can go to Starbucks and plug it in, right? So we need to think about that. So pandemic re-privileging the privilege, work from home. I don't know how to do this. I'm an office person, I'm a class person. Suddenly I had to teach like I'm doing from this hall. I need to teach from home. So I need to set it up. So how many people can afford this? Online courses, I always had aversion for. Now I sit for 2 hours and teach. Okay, so online courses, how many can afford? So digital classroom and all that is happening. So digital curriculum, digital courses. We don't even have, India, for example, is, we know the illiteracy. We know the rural-urban divide. Now, how could you go on with this disparity? Online shopping is on the rise. Everybody is into online shopping. And on the contrary, yes, something. Okay, I'll try to wind up in the next few minutes. And so we have this digital disparities and online shoppers versus no food migrants, right? Yeah, I'm going to show you a picture of some of these soon. So communities are forced to migrate, and they don't have the food, and in many Indians died on the streets, and as we know. So how do we connect this? As I say, local global accessibility, and we need to encourage that. Imagine now you are all in Udupi. I'm sitting here in Europe, and there were speakers from Europe. This is a kind of finding some opportunity out of this difficulty. Otherwise, I wouldn't be knowing you all. You wouldn't be knowing me, right? One of the local Indians is able to speak to you by sitting here in Europe, sharing thoughts, right? So this is a kind of finding an opportunity out of this difficulty. Now, this is a quick thing, a slide where I say, how COVID, the direction, produces digital inequalities. The technical aspects I spoke to and all that, physical access is limited, internet is not working in many places, internet availability is not, a slower connections, all that. And then we don't have a social support networks. I even told some of, in one of the speeches, and to Indian students in different parts of India, in Bengal, I think, how collect a laptop, keep a cell phone where 5-6 of you can sit together and learn. So these are the difficulties we need to provide. MPM college should think about it. Universities should think about it. Check how many students have laptops, how many students have cell phones. If only one has, and if request him or her to share with 5-6 people, we need to find a way. They can come together. They can develop an ethical, rationalist community formation by cutting across the intersectionality. So we need to do that, right? That's what I mean. And of course, with that, with the COVID situation, with the digital inequalities, the vulnerabilities are more, the sufferings are more. Health, e-health, people are speaking about e-health, and there is health literacy also. I have to be alert how to take vaccination. What sort of vaccination? Covishield or AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson. These are all COVID health literacy. How many of you can speak about the different effects of COVID vaccination? You see how we are all qualified, and yet we are ignorant. All of us are illiterates, and we should not blame the rural Indians. True? We need to have the sensitivity. So our vulnerabilities are more. Our mental health, many times we are locked at home. We don't have friends to talk to. I couldn't get somebody to share food. I couldn't go to anybody's food. It's a stress, right? And how do you manage? My wife works from home, my child has to study, and so on, all of them, right? We have to coordinate more vulnerables, but we need to be prepared. So there are multi-layered responsibilities we have to have, so strategies, as I say in this slide, government using somebody else's data, of course, I am thanking them there, I am in the footnote that is there. So governments, organizations, corporations, and communities, we have to come together beyond the intersectionalities, beyond the transnational intersectionalities, cut across our barriers, see whether out of this great difficulty, can we find an opportunity to be humane, to establish ethical humanism, which we don't have. There was never a golden age in the past, but we can create one in the future, right? So we can use this opportunity. That should be that kind of, we should improve our literacy and so on, support system. Okay, so transnational intersectional, I've spoken about it, this kind of race, caste-based divisions and so on. We need more of international organizations. UN is almost dead, right? Due to the rich countries smothering the UN out. UN has to come up, made powerful, and many organizations, WHO and many others, have to be created, particularly to think about the poor countries. We have and just not leave it to these organizations. You and me have to play a crucial role. That's what I mean by local, global, humanistic actors, networks we need to create to, to attack the racial casteism or racism and gender discrimination, interconnecting all that. The West has to have its responsibilities, right? So that means, Germany was against patent being loosened up for the production of vaccination in different countries. That means patent means I hold the patent for a vaccine. I will not let others to produce. That's unethical, right? Imagine Germany saying that, no, we don't want to loosen up the patents we have on vaccines. Others will casually produce and then spread and all that. No, you can't let people drop down and dead, right? So we need to loosen up. The West has its responsibility. It has to pay back. Many of the countries that are suffering now were colonized. So they need to pay back. That's called reparation. You need to pay back to the ex-colonized who are still suffering the colonial effects and so on, neo-colonial situation. Likewise, local government, India cannot go on blaming the West. We need to be responsible. Look at yesterday's data. The government of India's data says so far 410,000 people have died out of COVID. I repeat, 410,000 people have died. Therefore, India is saying happily we are in the third situation, after US and Brazil, and we are okay. That's not okay. Recent study yesterday, this was shared across the world, that more than 4 million Indians would have died. Where is 410,000? And where is 4 million Indians died? So 10 times more Indians have died. And the scientists are narrowing down how Indian government has distorted data. This is highly irresponsible. This is not the way to, who of these Indians would have died? The millions. Clearly, you understand, you use this concept of transnational intersectionality, they would have been victims of caste, they would have been victims of class, they would have been victims of gender, they would have been victims of race. You see? So local government should be a lot more humane and responsible. Therefore, I call ethical democratization of healthcare and sharing, community farming. We cannot blame corporations, we cannot blame West, we cannot blame government. All of us, ordinary people, have to have ethical community formation by cutting across this transnational intersectionalities. So this is the picture. I'm going to end now. This is a picture of a migrant community, right? This is like, my brother, right? I want to connect with him. The suffering, he is carrying a child. It could be my child. That sister could be my sister, right? Ordinary migrants. The moment I look at them as Muslims or Christians or lower caste or this poor and that, I lose my humanity. I self-dehumanize, right? Can we connect? Can I share my food? Whatever little bit I have, that sensitivity, I think we need to cultivate. This is a very important image. Please keep that in your mind. And this is another image that shook across the world. People don't even have a dignified burial ground. There were no firewoods in Delhi to bury the dead. I lost very close people. I'm still mourning. I'm not fully out of my mind. They are not out of my mind yet, right? I'm still mourning. Okay, so this is another image. And all these images come from this great brother, Danish Siddiqui, who was shot dead recently in Afghanistan between the Taliban and the others. Okay, and he was a graduate. He graduated from Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi. That's where he was going to be buried. And he was an exemplar of humanism. It is from him I took these pictures, and it's powerful. And that brother proved his worth as a fine human and passed away, sadly, very soon. But he taught us a lesson, how to be ethically humanist, even in this horrendous, difficult situation called COVID-19. I think we all should try. We should not be conceited. We have to overcome our transnational intersectionalities. Thank you for your patient listening. I stop here.
Shanti ma'am.
Thank you, Gaji, for your vivid and insightful talk and explaining us the concept related to exclusionary practices and sensitizing us that no more our social evils are local. it reached globally, and also critically enriching us how these challenges are to be looked at. Hope many of us hereafter try to understand the how exclusionary practices are normalized. By understanding that, I think we can be more sensible to these discriminatory practices. Now, thanks again. And now the floor is open for questions. I think two questions we have received in the chat. Let me read out those questions. Yeah, the issues of caste, race, gender are not confined to any national boundaries you mentioned. So in that case, are you suggesting that solutions are beyond national boundaries and to be seen in transnational level?
Okay. Could I go ahead with a quick answer on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after that, we may read
Right.
the question.
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate. Yes. What do we do with the moment we say, I say caste-based violence is happening in America? What can we do sitting in India, right? American government would say, no, this is America. Don't mess with our sovereignty, all that they would say, right? That's how I fully agree. And no, I don't mean that there is no national governmental responsibility. I don't mean that. We need to have the policies. And that's why I said in one of the slides, local government responsibilities. I know very clearly I said, that's where I brought in Indian government, how it should be sensitive to our own problems. We need to, that is why the moment, if I'm a prime minister or a chief minister, I need to address this. And how my poor Indian brethren and children, they are all falling down dead. What do I do? So how do I bring in money, policy, sensitivity to break the barriers? So this has to be done at the local level, local government, national responsibility, and all that. That's one. At the same time, there are countries who will not care. Take, for example, if like in Hungary, Romas were sprayed with disinfectants. Imagine they would have been prone to a lot of chemical attack, literally. Now, UN cannot keep quiet about this. Europe cannot keep quiet about this, right? So European Union came up with talking about, oh, there is this LGBT issue. Hungary is not taking seriously, and so on. Yes, LGBT plus issues are important. I write about that. Okay, a transsex person is important. An intersex person. Suppose if I have a child with both sexual organs, what do we do? What do you all think about my body, my child, right? So my intersex baby has equal right like me. So that's important. But I should also talk about the pandemic crisis. So European Union selectively talks about LGBT issues, but not about this, attack on Romas, right? How do you do this? So there has to be global as well as local responsibilities. I don't want the local government, local community to wash off their hands as this is not our problem. And let's say, no, you can't do that. COVID, thankfully, can hit anybody, anytime. We don't even know who's going to infect us. I've lost a close academic who probably was infected. He doesn't even know where did it come from. You see? So that way, the disease is democratic, but our response also have to be, democratic at the local and global level. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, social distancing is one way of breaking the chain of the virus. From your talk, you're concluding that the earlier socially distanced communities have become more vulnerable, meaning that earlier communities who are socially distanced, are they more vulnerable?
Absolutely. You got it right. Thank you so much for that question. This is what I said in the US. There are more articles now, research-based, very clearly how African Americans are suffering. They were suddenly prone to lockdown. They were already ghettoized. They were traveling long distance for the small jobs that they were doing. They were working in McDonald's. They were cleaners. Like in India, the oppressed communities are forced to clean, right? In the crematoria, we all know about how the dead could not be buried and then burned. But the point is, who were burying the dead in Delhi? the marginalized communities. Do we know about their histories? How many of them have died? How many of them were infected? Do we care? You see? So the marginalized were, the already marginalized were remarginalized in India. The already marginalized in the US, racialized in the US were remarginalized. So they were locked down. Now they are, reopening. We don't have, there are no jobs. Where are they going to have? So I think there is the death rate in the African Americans in the US is definitely going to go up. They have not been adequately vaccinated. They don't have good source of food and all that, right? So it's so that way you are right. The already segmented, marginalized, racialized communities that have suffered caste-based, gendered communities, they are more vulnerable, suffering more. Inadequate healthcare support is worsening, and we all have to be alert. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from audience?
Yeah, madam. Madam, I have a question.
Yeah, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Gajendran sir, it was a very beautiful presentation, and it was very nice to hear you after a long gap of so many years. Myself and Kiran had met you so many times in the Jawaharlal Nehru University, the Center for Political Studies here. It is a nice, just remembering you once again here on this platform. Just I would like to know two questions, answers from your side. Question number one, there is this thing, a rumor is going on. There is a lot of talk and debate is going on in the newspapers, press, media, everywhere with respect to this thing, COVID and the COVID-related diplomatic issues. And just I would like to know, so what is this COVID diplomacy and how it is going to completely bring it in a human approach in order to overcome this particular issue? This is the first one, question number one.
Okay.
My second question is that now how to bring in how to have an inclusive approach for those persons' vulnerabilities and those who have completely excluded from this what we call as the vaccination policy. Whether it is a country like, for example, South Asia, East Asia, West Asia, European countries, you are talking about, you have so-called empirical studies that you are carrying out with respect to the Caribbean studies and all that. So therefore, how to have this inclusive policy, because a lot of people are actually still under this thing, what we call as dismay and the fear that if we have this kind of a so-called the coronavirus, this vaccination here, there are a lot of misconception is being carried out to the common public at large. So therefore, how to completely have a human approach towards it and how to completely overcome this pandemic issues.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this question, and wonderful seeing you again. And I very much appreciate you joining us, and thank you for the questions again. Honestly, I'd like you, I'm also following the regular news and some articles. I don't have a very concrete answer, but here is my general observation. Diplomatic approach, yes. So they're all trying to figure out, and then clearly, I'll give you a quick example. US was not allowing some European countries, such as Italians, to go into US. Suddenly there was a ban for flights to come from Italy to come into the US, right? And this was happening. And then after a few days, US got banned. The moment the death rate went up, US was banned by some of the European countries. No more flights from the US. So all that is, so they're figuring it out, and then this is chaos. And already, there is this undertone of, when Trump was there and Trump was seen as very violent and all that, and European countries were figuring out, the NATO group, as they are called, they were trying to figure out how to sustain themselves without the American support. They were on the track already. So with this pandemic, they further wanted to put a lot of barriers and so on. Now with Biden coming up, just a week ago, Angela Merkel, as she is pronounced in German, our German chancellor, she went to the US and then we're trying to bridge and so on. So they're trying to work out. But this is how I say the European Union, for instance, is a very fine example. It could help to overcome the transnational intersectionalities, as I say. Take for example, there are Romas in Hungary who could comfortably come into Germany and so on using the EU, facility. They can crisscross. Romas from Slovakia could come into Germany or go to France and so on. All that you need, you have your European Union passport. You go around. So it was loosening up the transnational intersectionalities. Now with this COVID, the rigidification happened. Which country, the border security, all that. We were in a shock after, close to a couple of decades. So people are still figuring it out, a long way to go. But one thing is very clear, the poor countries are going to suffer more. The West and the rest is definitely, the barriers are increasing more and more. Like I said, the vaccine passport, all of them are going to play very big havoc. The students coming in from the poor countries into the West are already diminishing. And there are other racial policies in the country, like such as US, where therefore Indians are going more into Canada now. All that is happening. So diplomatic approach has to be, I think, a lot more humane, sensitive. Countries who are already vaccinating well should really redistribute, the vaccines that they have and make sure it is democratized. And the patent has to be loosened. Therefore, say Kenya can produce its own vaccine. Otherwise, people will die. And the countries the Western countries who are, very rich because of their colonial past, they have to pay back. That's what I call reparation. You have the vaccine. You have the, Pfizer was invented here in Germany. It has to give a good chunk of Pfizer to the 6 African countries that were colonized by Germany, and because of which Germany is Germany now, right? So it has the responsibility to distribute to Cameroon or Togo and so on. Tanzania was also colonized by Germany, right? So this is what I'm saying. This has to come from the heart and the mind. So that's diplomacy, right? That's why I said in one of the slides, the Western countries that had colonized the world have the extraordinary responsibility, reparating responsibility. They have to pay back. Vaccine distribution, democratizing the healthcare is one way. Inclusive approach within the country, say for example, India or the US. That's when I know things like, you and me, all of us, the intellectual commitment to break barriers, to cut across religion, to cut across caste, to be human, right? Sharing. We don't have yet. We don't have yet. So I don't believe in that we had a golden age in the ancient India or medieval India, complete hoax. No. That the future is there. There is a possibility of a future golden age towards which we need to work to be inclusive. Good, you use the word inclusive. I didn't use the word. I appreciate that, right? So we need to be, that means you clearly show your heart and mind to include people, to cut across the gender and all that. So we have a long way to go. Definitely, I don't find religion as the source for it. We need to go beyond that, or caste as a source for it. We need to break all this to come up with new ideas, to share, to take care of each other. It's a long way to go, sir. I don't have a clear idea, but we need to break barriers. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions?
Madam, just one more clarification from your side, sir. This is in continuation of my earlier question. Sir, some apprehension is there.
Any more questions?
Yeah. Madam.
Who is that? Please mute yourself.
Please, other participants, mute yourself.
Yeah.
Kumar, can you meet your
Subhash, please unmute yourself and speak.
Sir, there are a lot of this thing apprehension is there amongst the people.
Right.
That a lot of people are actually now, there is a widespread circulation is there in the public that if you take this thing, Covishield, and then what is that? Covaxin, Covishield, Sputnik, AstraZeneca, and so many vaccinations are there in this thing. I don't know, it's in India, the trend is going on like this. I don't know what is the trend in the European countries and all that. And therefore, now how to overcome this what we call the apprehension from the people, and which you think that and which you suggested is the most effective one, and which can completely take care of overcoming this pandemic. This is the one issue. And my second important question is that just let me touch upon the basic, the fundamental question that, do you think that this coronavirus is a man-made or is it a natural one?
Okay. Thank you. The last question I want to take first.
Yeah.
Definitely it's man-made. Clearly is man-made. Now the thing is, now we know, given the US versus China diplomatic struggle, they are trying to pin down China as the culprit and all that. That's one side. I don't know where it's going to go on. We already have a trade war between China and US, many blockages and all that. Both countries have lost billions of dollars, and yet they are going on at loggerheads. On top of that, this is the thing. My guess is I don't have a clear understanding. Scientists are still trying to figure out. But here is the thing. But this is what, as a common man, I understand. Definitely, it's man-made, and clearly, I think a scientist would have really messed up. He was trying to figure out, and he got out of the lab, and it spread, and then the country, the countries would have tried to really cover it up and so on. So it's clearly man-made, beyond which I don't have any clear information to talk about. And so that's one side. But apprehensions about vaccines, we don't have a clue. Yes, this will go on. I have taken Pfizer, and they say Johnson & Johnson is supposed to tackle Delta better and so on. All these are, like I said, COVID illiteracy. We are trying to figure out. Nobody has an authentic answer. And in Germany, more than 45% or 40% have not even vaccinated. Imagine. I know friends who don't want to get vaccinated. I mean, clearly. And in the US, in the southern states like Tennessee, Louisiana, and so on, I was on phone with a friend in Texas just a week ago, and he lives in Texas. And he said, these stupid, I quote him, these idiot Americans in the southern states, they are evangelicals, Orthodox Christians. They think God will save them. They don't want to get vaccinated. That's kind of stupidity, right? So they are not only getting infected, they're going to be dead, and they are infecting others too. On top of that, we may have new variants over which our vaccines may not work. So that way, we don't have a clear idea, but the point is this. It's proven that Delta virus kills people very quickly, within a day or two, of those who have not taken vaccine. So if you've taken one vaccine shot, you are protected 38% or so. If you have taken 2 vaccine jabs, you are protected close to 89 or 90%. You see? So that is proven. So in the UK, around 47 to 48% of the dead because of Delta, 48% of them were not, they were vaccinated already. So this is also there, right? So even when you are vaccinated, older people might die, but younger people, might be protected better if you are vaccinated. So any vaccine, please get a jab done. It's very important. Any vaccine you need to get done if you have not done. That will protect you from not only Delta, but also other variants. Quickly, it is also said there could be future variants for which we need to take booster shots. So every year we may have to build on what we already have. But if you don't have the vaccine already, it's going to be worse. So we need to get it done. And that's all I know, sir. It may not be fully detailed. Sorry about this unscientific generalized explanations.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Kiran? Any questions?
No, I don't have any question. I think there was one question by some Prajwal Pinto.
Okay.
He has asked, Gaji, you are actually from Germany. I think something they wanted to ask that are there any excluded communities, means indigenous excluded communities within Europe, apart from the migrants like Asian and Africans who are actually vulnerable to pandemic and that social exclusion is? I think that is what the content of that question is.
Correct. Yeah, I understand. So thank you for the question. I appreciate your sensitivity. Yes. in addition to the migrants, yes, like I referred to, there is this community called Romas. Just Google and see, you know, Romas in Europe, and you would know the maps. And
Gajendran sir, you are muted.
yeah, now I'm unmuted. Sorry. So I don't know whether you could hear me. So I thank you for the question to think about the, you know, local marginalized communities in Germany and other parts of Europe. So yes, you know, Romas is one that I referred to. Romas have the history of being in Europe for close to 1,000 years. They have different origin stories. One of them is that they are Indian migrants into Europe some 1,000 years ago and so on. And they are spread out, especially in Eastern Europe. And Hitler hated them, like he hated Jews, and he butchered. Thankfully, many survived after all the difficulties, and they are there, and they are marginalized. That's one group. Also, in the Scandinavian countries, such as, you know, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, I'm planning to travel and be with this community called Samis, S-A-M-I-S, Samis. They are reindeer herders. You know, move around from, you know, Russia, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. They travel back and forth. So I want to be with them to understand their language and then talk about connecting with India. And so,
Gajendran sir, you are muted.
Muted.
I don't know. It automatically happened. Sorry, it automatically happened. I didn't do it. So I'm planning to be with the Samis of Scandinavia. So this is another native group. They are not there in Germany, but they are a marginalized community in Scandinavia, such as Norway, Sweden. Imagine in Norway, Samis were not allowed to use their language. So the moment you stop my language, my mother tongue, you are erase my memory, my history, my knowledge, traditions, and so on. So Samis were prone to that. I want to connect that, and then with, you know, what is happening in terms of, you know, Hindi imposition or any other language domination in India. I want to connect. So in that sense, I want to be with Samis. So they are also suffering this COVID situation. So these are some of the communities who are prone to this re-marginalization and re-digitalization, de-digitalization, and so on. And I think these government, but thankfully I trust some of these governments, such as Swedish government, Norwegian government, they are a lot more sensitive. The non-state actors, the communities, networks, they are very sensitive, human rights oriented. So some of these Norwegians, they have got married with the Samis, or they are very committed and feel the oneness. Ethical humanism is there, like I said. And so I'm a lot more reassured that the Samis and the Romas would be protected through this community formation between non-Samis and non-Romas and them. So thank you for the question again. Yeah.
Can we wind up the session? Yeah. I think no more questions. Can I add one point to this question?
Please.
To the social exclusionary groups. In Tamil Nadu, we are working on a social group called Nadodigal, meaning nomads. They are amount to, I mean, their population total amounts to 5 to 7 lakhs as per the last census 2011. And not a single authority who are in charge for creating awareness regarding vaccination have approached them. So this is the plight of such social group. I'm sure that that kind of many social groups can be found in every state also. Thank you for your overwhelming session, Gaji, and giving us a global perspective about pandemic in nutshell. Thank you very much. May I request the principal, Mr. Anthony TP of Government First Grade College, Bettangadi, Karnataka, to give a presidential address, sir.
Good evening, all of you. At the very outset, I have to thank MPM College Principal, Professor Verma, the convener, Dr. Kiran, a good friend of mine, and all the listeners on behalf of the entire viewers of this particular webinar. I would like to rather congratulate Professor Ayyappan for presenting a wonderful talk. This is rather not only academic, but also rather a scholastic presentation from the humanities and social sciences approach is concerned. Being an anthropologist, I think the entire problem of COVID-19 pandemic, what are the upheavals that it has created over the world, the existing scenario of segregation, and a new vista or new interpretation, rather a new literature of understanding of COVID-19, I think that we could understand from the talk, the presentation of Professor Ayyathurai. He has given a new interpretation. Being, we are not scientists, we are not experts in the field of medical sciences. For a layman's understanding, how COVID is to be understood at the transnational or transsectional level, international, national level, from the global to the local level, this has not only created a problem that has affected the entire globe. We would consider this as pandemic because a particular disease which has got a cross border spreading. So for the throughout the presentation, what I could understood, Professor Ayyappan has made a thorough study of the latest statistics, how it has happened in the US, maybe in the European countries, the Latin American countries, Asian countries, including India. Being an Indian who has got an experience, first-hand experience in staying in the US as well as in Germany, now you can see this kind of social exclusions which has created by pandemic and which has widened the existing social divisions. If you look into the statistics, what I could understand, those who are already well socially distanced, socially segregated categories have affected badly and have been victimized. Now, what I would suggest, what would be the solution? Solution is a humanitarian approach. It has been rightly stressed by Professor Ayyappan beautifully. The pandemic, which has created havoc in the world, it has affected a lot of humans. More than 4 million of people have died in India. And if you look at the people who have suffered are the socially segregated, the socially excluded population, even in the US. Take the case of Germany, take the case of Europe, and even Latin America or the Asian countries. Once again, I congratulate Professor Ayyappan for providing this particular opportunity to the listeners from the anthropological point of view, as well as from the historical point of view, how we can understand and what are the new, what we call literature, a new literature that it has given birth to study the pandemic from different point of view, especially in terms of digital learning, the digital literacy, or the technology used. You can see at the grassroots level, there is digital gap, still it prevails. The digital learning is affected badly. And therefore, what I would say, there is only one solution, cutting across the existing social segregation that we forget. We have to establish, we have to build up a nexus on humanistic approach. Through humanistic approach, we have to build up confidence among the people. We have to build up confidence, especially the migrants, the nomadics, the poor people, and the socially segregated lot. And this is what humans, all nationals, all the national governments, the local governments has to do. we have to spread the importance of vaccination, and then we have to bring about confidence among the people, and the pandemic can be overcome with our own confidence as well as hard work with a humanistic approach. I conclude for providing me this particular opportunity to make a concluding remark on this particular occasion. I thank all the viewers, especially Professor Ayyappan,